Right, so I think it's about exactly 10 o'clock. So let's get started with actually the first session of the event. Maybe first of all, welcome. It's great to have you all here. I hope everybody had a safe trip over here, managed to grab a coffee, and are ready to get started with the first session of the event. Thanks, of course, to Etta, to you for hosting this fantastic event and getting everybody together here. So the session I've prepared for you today to get started is called How to Build a Bridge Between IT and Business and Speed Up Application Delivery. So maybe before we get started, a few quick words. I'll just hold on for a second. So some people coming in, just finished their coffee probably. So my name is Mark Mulder. I'm here with a company called Webcon. I think I'll be one of the few people here doing the session in any other language than Romanian, so I hope that's all right with everybody. I speak a few languages, but unfortunately Romanian is not one of them. Maybe we'll have to add that to the list at some point. So I have about 15 years of experience in business process automation, digitization, and I started actually in e-commerce, an electronics retailer. And well, 15 years ago, e-commerce was a very upcoming thing. So I'm personally from the Netherlands, as a bit of information. So on the one side, there was a technical aspect of e-commerce and getting a website set up and allowing people to buy products online. On the other side, it was very much about building bridges, as the topic of the presentation is. Building bridges between this new and up-and-coming thing, e-commerce, and then on the other side, our 80 physical stores that we have throughout the country, and getting processes synchronized between the two. So even in that role, it was very much about building bridges and connecting the IT side to the business side. After that, I did about 10 years of ERP. So huge projects, large implementations, competing with companies like SAP. And in the last 2 years, I have the pleasure to be working with low-code process automation tools. So what you should know before we get started with the session. So the session is really about how to use prototyping tools and citizen-assisted development to improve the cooperation between business and IT within your company. So maybe to get started, so I have a bit of a feeling of the audience, citizen development. Maybe if you could raise your hand if you're familiar with the topic citizen development. Okay, so we have just a few people, so it's a good idea maybe if I explain a little bit what it's about. Using low-code software, you can build applications in a very drag and drop way. So low-code is, I would say, let's say Lego for building applications. So you don't need developers, you don't need Java, .NET people to build an application. If you can drag and drop and you have a little bit of knowledge about how an application works, you can put that together using low-code technology. So citizen development is the idea of giving your business user a license to a low-code platform and let them build their own applications. So that just as a little bit of an idea, and I will be coming back to that later on in the presentation. So to get started, and I think probably everybody realizes this, right? Digitization is really important. Digital transformation, digitizing process automation is a very hot topic in all kinds of sectors. I mean, I go to the most advanced companies where you would think everything is tip-top in order and everything is digitized. That is not the reality. There's always still a lot to be improved. And digitization obviously allows you to work faster, to work more efficiently, take a burden off your employees. I never want to see digitization as a tool to get rid of people, but actually allow the people that you have to do more and work more efficiently and get more out of their time. So if you digitize, you also gather data. Data that allows you to make decisions, to improve processes, and to do what you're doing better. So it's a really big topic. And in the past, if you were into digitization, it was a possibility to get ahead of the competition, right? Right now, it's a different situation. Right now, if you are not doing digitization, you're going to be one step behind the competition. So this is a crucial topic. And the process, well, the problem around digitization is, like I said, everywhere there are still a lot of processes that are on paper, in Excel files. And just to be clear, when I speak about digitization, some people say, well, it's Excel or it's Outlook, so it's digital, right? I would disagree, because if you write something down in an Excel file that is on your computer somewhere that nobody has access to, what actually happens in that Excel file, it's not transparent, it's not shared within the organization. If you're on a holiday, nobody can get to it. So doing digitization in a proper way is not sending emails or doing things in Excel. There's a lot of repetitive tasks. Things happening over and over again. If you can automate those tasks, obviously you can win a lot of time and efficiency within your organization. The administrative overhead, so not your core business, but all the stuff you have to do on the side, financial, bookkeeping, controlling, stuff that you really don't want to spend your time on actually. Processes will be inconsistent if they're not somewhere centrally orchestrated and digitized. So especially if you have a slightly larger organization, different departments, different locations, if you're operating internationally, you might think that people are doing the same process because everybody got the same email telling them about what to do. But actually, if you go and speak to all those people, you'll figure out that all of them have their own interpretation of the process and everything is done slightly differently. So, then you cannot compare the processes to each other, how the people are working, so that is a problem. So, fortunately, in the digital world, there's also a lot of solutions available. You can just buy a bit of software off the shelf, commercial off-the-shelf software to digitize something. That comes with a bit of problem because it's never the scope that you exactly need for your processes. And to cover all your processes, you'll probably have to buy a lot of pieces of software to cover everything. So then what you can do, get some developers on board, right, and build your own software. Well, obviously, then you need expensive developers. It'll take a lot of time to build your application. Developers are poorly available, so there is some issues. And then there is, like I said, low code. Lego for building applications, and that's specifically what we're going to be focusing on during today's session. But then still, if you have a digital tool in place and you want to deliver solutions for your business user to digitize processes, here's a big issue, because business and IT, they think in a different way. And anybody that has been involved in projects, speaking to the business, has been a business analyst. I've personally been in that role. It's very much about building bridges, and usually IT and business, they speak a different sort of language. They have different interests, different targets, different goals, different priorities. So for IT to actually be an enabler for the business is an issue. Usually business has the feeling that, well, whatever I ask from IT, it takes too long, it costs too much, and they don't understand what I need. And if you speak to IT, they will tell you that, well, the business doesn't know what they want, they never describe me clearly what I should build. So there's a friction between the two. So today, we're going to look at some possibilities to improve that cooperation. And just to underline how important this cooperation between business and IT is, 57% of IT projects fail due to faulty communication. People not understanding each other, not being on the same page as to what are we actually doing here together, not understanding each other's situation properly. So coming back to citizen development, right? So let's imagine we have a low-code tool, Lego for building applications, super easy. So let's just give our business user, a key user, a process owner, a license to the software and just let them build their own applications, right? Seems perfect because they know their business, they know their processes, so just give them a license and let them do it themselves. Well, actually, that comes with a few issues. So going into citizen development, what type of issues are you going to run into? So actually the tools can be pretty overwhelming because this is a business user. They're not used to building applications, so they're not going to know what to do exactly and which tool to pick and how to build what. And the other issue is they're not going to use the tools properly because, well, they're not trained to be application builders, so there's going to be mistakes. They're not going to plan out their work properly because they have their own perspective, they have their goal that they need to meet. Coordinating with all other departments that are involved in the process, that need to be part of the process, is tricky. I see I'm blocking the screen for some of you, right? Should I step back so you can also see what's happening, or is it okay? So, and not planning out your work properly, eventually it's going to lead to failure. Also, they're not going to think about stuff like security, because they care about their business process, right? Security is not something they care about. And that's not their fault. That's totally natural, but it's a problem you're going to run into. Also, they're not going to consider all users equally because, well, they're building the thing, they care about their process. So some people are going to get left out. So we at Webcon have developed a different way to enable business and IT to speak to each other. It's called citizen-assisted development. So instead of citizen development, we've called it citizen-assisted development. So we've developed a tool that I'm going to be demonstrating live for you in a second that gives the citizen, so the business user, the process owner, a place where they feel at home, where they're not overwhelmed with complicated tools. That doesn't expect them to become an app developer. It just gives them a space to explain what process they're doing in a very easy way. This streamlines the whole cooperation between business and IT. On top of that, we've added some functionality so you can create the whole documentation of the prototype you've built with the push of a button. So you don't need to write the document yourself, we'll just generate it for you. So that's going to save you a lot of time. And afterwards, once the prototyping phase is done between somebody from the business side, a process owner, and somebody from IT side, usually a business analyst, they can do a handover to IT. IT is going to take care of security, scalability, and actually add all the business logic, integrations to other software that needs to be tied into the solution. So they're going to take care of all this. But they will have the input from the business user as a starting point, and nothing goes to waste there. So the use case I'll be working with today, I'll be building a prototype for you, is an internal purchase request. So let's say my laptop breaks down and I need to get a new one. So what I usually do is I would send a request to my manager by email. My laptop fell apart, it's not starting up, battery is dead, whatever. I need to get a new one. So the manager receives this email, hopefully, if he's not on a holiday. So he will have a look at it, and at some point he will need to approve it. Maybe he will have to clarify some things with me. Why do I actually need this laptop, or why is such an expensive one, or whatever. So he will probably call me or send me an email back. And then at the end of the line, there might be an additional approval if it's a very expensive laptop and somebody else needs to say okay. And then at the end of the story, or somebody needs to go and order me a laptop and get my Active Directory installed, get me access to the ERP system and get it on my desk so I can work with it. So a process that is very caught up in emails, and we would like to digitize this and get it working properly. So usually somebody from IT, business analyst, would speak to the process owner. They would write a requirements document on Word, add a bit of a process flow, and this would be the input that goes to IT to go and build something. Then IT has a look at it, they put it in the drawer, it takes a long time before it gets priority, and then at some point they will build something, deliver it, and well, it turns out that it's not exactly what the business user really wanted. So now I will sit down because I'll be typing, otherwise it's going to be a bit tricky. So let's have a look at the tool that Webcon uses for this process. So here, so this is a tool we called our designer desk, specifically for building prototypes. So we're going to do exactly that. So we are going to give this a name. ETTU purchase request. We can give it a description. And then we are good to go. So there's a few steps we're going to go through, and we at Webcon are very process-based. We love thinking in processes, and everything we do starts with a process. So we'll do the same thing here in our prototype. So just to explain the setting, this is our business user and an IT business analyst sitting down, doing a workshop. Business user is explaining what he is doing at the moment in email, and together they're going to build a prototype. So let's have a look at the actual process we have here. I'll just get rid of the endpoint, so we just start from the very beginning. So like I said, it started with a request. So here for each step of the process I have the possibility to describe what actually is happening here. So the user hands in a request for a purchase he or she needs to make. And the good thing here for the business user, it's all free text, so we're not making any complex business logic, it's just free text describing. So after we have our request, as I mentioned, there's going to be a manager approval in the process. So the manager has to approve the purchase request. As I mentioned, there might be some additional approval necessary depending on how much or what the value of my purchase request is. So we can add a decision here, and let's say we'll call this check the value. We'll check if the value is over 5,000. So if it is, we would like to have an additional approval. So we'll call this our board approval. I won't be doing the description for all of these steps because we'll be getting a bit repetitive, so I'll try to keep things interesting. So I have the board approval here. Well, at some point, if the approval is positive, we'll have an endpoint here. Let's say here it's approved. At that point, we still need something to happen because now it's approved, and then physically or somebody needs to go and place a purchase order to actually get my laptop on site. So we'll be describing this in a moment. And there's a possibility that they will say, no, actually, Mark, you just don't know how to turn on your laptop. You don't need to have a new one. We'll show you how it works. All right, so we have a possibility to decline it as well. So let's say for now, let's keep it simple. This is our process. So next thing we can do is actually connect the dots. So how do we move from one step to the other? So on this transition, I will say at this point we submit our request to our manager. The request is sent to the manager. I can actually do some additional descriptions here if this transition should only be possible in a specific case. I can just describe why or when it should or should not be possible. Just free text, and that's going to be input for IT to actually deliver the logic that needs to happen here. I can also say who is going to be getting the task here. So I'll say at this point it should go to the user's manager, so the superior. So the manager is going to have two options, either decline the request, or in this case, we can approve the request. Then we are checking the value, right? And if it is over 5K, we want to go to the board approval. So here, yes, it is over 5K, and in this case, if it is not, we can just push it straight on to accept it. Let's keep it simple. And the same thing for the board. The board also has the possibility to decline the request or to approve the request. So now we've spent a few minutes drawing the process. So let me save it and let's have a look what the platform actually does for it at the moment. So if you would do this in Word, you would have a picture in Word that you can do absolutely nothing with. If we have a look at our prototype, we can actually go and run it. So here we have, based on our process, a living, working prototype. It doesn't look very fancy yet because we didn't add any forms or fields or data or whatever, but we have our application. We actually see our process. So we see all the steps within the process: request, manager approval, board approval. We have some standard elements being added to the user interface. So actually we have our description that we added visible. We can add attachments to the prototype. We can comment at any step. Well, the form is still very blank because we didn't look at it yet. We're going to in a minute. But I can actually move through the process. I can submit it. So we will go to the manager approval. The manager can decline or approve. And this way we've actually run through our process. So this is a really nice possibility to double check with your user. Is this really everything? Did we forget about some steps? Is it complete? It's going to be way, way easier for the user to look at this, to give feedback on something that they're actually seeing and working with, instead of just giving them a blank piece of paper. Good luck, please write down everything, and then in 3 months' time we will go and build it. So this is already a very good starting point. So if we go a step further, and we go and add some data to our process. So again, it's super, super visual, super easy to use. So let's see what we actually need here in our process. So we have some fields to pick from. I can add users, integer fields, item lists, email addresses, anything. So at this moment, what I would like here, so I would like to know actually who submitted the request. So again, for this field, I can describe what is happening here. Do I need to validate something? Are we selecting categories or some complex business logic in the background? So I can describe that myself. I can even define a default value. So in this case, the submitter is going to be the current user that's logged in. And well, if there's more advanced scenarios, I have the room here to describe anything I need. So let's also say we want to see who is actually the manager that's going to be receiving this request. So we can actually set a default value here as well, the current user's superior. So it'd be nice to have a date here, so we know actually when the request was submitted. So I have a request date, and there we can also just fill it with the current date once we start. Would be nice if we can describe actually why I'm buying a new laptop. So we will just add a text field over here. Call this our description. And then maybe to give you an example, let's say we want to select our department here. So I'll make this a drop-down choice field where I can select a department. So obviously, at this moment, we don't have this connected to any database of who I am, what department I'm working in, but we can actually add a very simple data source, even within the prototype. So we can add a new lookup list, just to make the prototype realistic, and we'll just add some departments here. And afterwards, I mean, if you have your departments already defined in your ERP system, you can just integrate over web services and pull the departments from your ERP system. We don't need to reinvent the wheel if it's not necessary. But for the prototype, let's just define some departments to make it realistic. So let's call this data source our departments. All right. And then it would be nice if I can define the actual item that I want to be purchasing. So let's put that down here. And let's say the item here again, for the final version of the application, you would probably connect to your ERP and get your items and item categories on board. For now, we will just describe. So for the item, we want to have a SKU that should be selected. It has a name or a description. And then let's say the item also has a price. And let's say we can set the amount if I want to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5. Right, and I think that's complicated enough to get the idea across. So if we save the form we just created, we go back to have a look. So now we spent another 5-10 minutes having a look at the data. We go back, we run our prototype, and we see that we actually have our application, but now we have data we can play with. We have me as a current user being visible, we have a manager, we have the current date being added. So we can actually start playing with this application as an end user. Even after 15 minutes of prototyping, they already see a result. So they will sort of feel ownership that, wait a minute, this is actually what I described, what we told, and it's right here, and I can use it, and we can improve it. So let's play with it. So I need a new laptop. I have my data source here available. So I can say I'm in the purchasing department, for example, and I have a functional item list, so I can order a laptop. Let's say I need 1, and it's going to be a laptop for $999. Once you have this connected to data sources, obviously you would just select the laptop and the rest is going to be filled automatically. So let's submit it to our manager. Let's say the manager approves the request. So we didn't build any business logic to check our value, right? If it's over 5,000 or not, we just wrote down that this should be validated. So here I'm just manually saying, do we go left or right in the process? And do we go to the board approval, or do we just assume it was under 5,000? Since at this point we don't want the complexity of business logic because it should be easy for the business user. So let's say, yes, it is over 5,000. That will put us here in the board approval step, where the board also needs to approve. So now we've gone through our process. And at this point, what we would actually like to happen is a purchase order being placed in our ERP system. Because, well, let's say we have SAP in the company, we are on the Dynamics, Business Central, whatever, and the purchase order needs to be landing there. We don't want to have the manager having to log in manually to SAP and again copy everything and set a purchase order there. So let's add some more details to our prototype. So the first thing we can do, this is what we call our field matrix, and this is where the world of, let's say, the process steps and the data in the form come together. And here we can define how do I want to have these fields behave in each step of the process. So are they going to be visible now? Are they going to be editable, or is it read-only? And are they going to be mandatory or not? So actually in the first step, the submitter, the manager, the request date were all pre-filled, and I don't want them to be editable. So they're just going to be read-only. I really want to have a description, and I also need to have a department. And then once we go to the manager, actually I don't want the manager to really edit anything, so I just want to make everything read-only. For board approval, well, we can also set all of those fields because, well, at some point if you have a complex form, there's going to be quite a lot of checkboxes to go through, so you can just set all of them to read-only. Or you can actually copy the state from one of the previous steps. So you can say, I want this step to look the same as the manager approval step. So that's going to make things quite easy. So once we do this, we can already see some change in our prototype, because now, right, these fields are not editable anymore, they're just read-only. So it's starting to look and feel more like an actually mature application. But what we don't have yet is the actions that should be happening in the background. So here I've added these steps. What I want to still describe is all the stuff that's happening in the background. So I have a whole list of actions available to me here, from email notifications to validations to tasks or adding privileges or taking them away or anything you can imagine. So let's say at this point, without making it overly complex, here on this transition between the request and the manager approval, I want to have an email notification sent to the requester and the manager. So again, here, I don't want to make it too complicated, so just describe what should be happening. I want to have an email notification. Email to the manager and the requester. And let's leave it at that. And then at the very end, once everything is approved, like I said, I want to have my purchase order created in SAP. So at this long list of actions, I can say I want to have an integration. Actually, when we enter this step, create the purchase order in SAP. So again, this is going to be input for the IT department. They will just know we need to create a purchase order, and it's their role later on to actually write a web service, connect to SAP, and get the service or the purchase order created. So here we're just describing and prototyping. So if we save it again, we have our prototype pretty much complete. So we start playing with it. Our business user gets some additional people on board, maybe another department that plays a role in the process, maybe the manager that does the approval afterwards, so they can also see it. And when doing this, they're going to run into some things they would like to add or change or do differently. We can do so. So if we do a process, and let's go to the second step. So let's say we need a printer, in this case. Once again, we'll just make up a printer, one of them for $2.99. We'll submit it.
Those values are inputted by the user, by the requester?
In this prototype, yes. In the actual application that IT is going to deliver here, I would imagine that the item is selected from...
The company has some standard distribution. Doesn't matter what the user is asking.
In this case, it's just about understanding the process that is happening. So you can, in the final tool, so this is just a prototype. If you have the actual live application, you can restrict it, limit it, get the items from SAP, not do it within Webcon with a local data source. This is really about understanding what the business user needs, and then IT is going to build the logic. But yes, you can make it as complex as you want and restrict it to just these two specific laptops that can be used internally. Yeah. So if we are in this second step now, we get the manager on board and they would like to make some changes. The manager says, well, actually, what I would need is I would like to be able to send it back to the requester if I have any questions. So that's no problem. We are working in the prototype. So while we are working with the prototype, we can just add an additional step to send it back. Save the process. So if we go back now to the one we started, so this was the last one. We were in the middle of the process. We made some changes, and we can actually continue with the new version of the process, with the changes we just made immediately available to you. So now we have the possibility to send it back. It will go back to the request phase. I can ask some questions. I could add another text field here to add those questions. I can use the comment field. leave comments, leave attachments at any point, submit it, and go through the process again. So at this point, it's already an application that is starting to come to life. So, like I said, we also have actually reports available here. So, all the processes we did in our prototyping phase are going to be visible here because, well, the user might be interested in the process and the front end and the data they're inputting. If you get somebody from management or the board involved, they might be way more interested in the actual reports they're going to be getting and how can I see what the average value per month was, etc. So even in the prototyping phase, the reporting is already important and it's already visible over here. So what I would like to show you, if we'll continue the process we were doing first of all. So we'll go here. If we complete the process, approve it, go through the board approval, we'll leave a comment here. They will also approve it, and we are approved. So something that our tool also gives you out of the box for the prototyping on one side, but also for the actual live application you're going to be using later on, is the history of what you've been doing. So for each process-based application you build in Webcon, or each prototype you build using Webcon, out of the box you will get an audit trail where you can see exactly what happened in this process instance. Which step did we go through? Where did we start? What happened? What data did we add in the process? Did we leave any comments? If you're going to have documents being added and updated during the process, you're going to have documents with version history. So actually, out of the box, without having to dig in any databases, you will have a clear overview of exactly what happened during the process. Even the stuff that is happening in the background. So here, when we submit it, we defined that we want to send an email notification. So in this case, we see that at this point an email notification was sent out. In the full productive version of the application, we would see that an email notification was sent out. When exactly? To whom? Did it arrive correctly? So you will have the full information available to you over here. The same thing goes for the integration. So here again, it's just a bit of text saying that we created a purchase order in SAP. In the actual productive version, you will see at this time point, we contacted SAP over a REST web service and a purchase order was successfully created. And you could even go further and say, after SAP successfully received the laptop, I want to do something more and add more steps to the process. So you can add as much complexity as you would like. But the good thing is here is that, well, right now we spend 25 minutes building a prototype. Well, imagine if your end user is writing the requirements document that we started with for half an hour. They're not going to have nearly the feeling and the understanding of what it is actually that we're going to be getting at the end of the line. They won't have the possibility to play with it, to give feedback, so they're going to be writing and analyzing for a long time. And then once they finally get their feedback from IT, well, they still probably need to fine-tune some things because it's not really what they had in mind and there's been some misunderstanding along the line. So what we can do now, and I want to leave some room for questions at the end, especially since we have the small room, and I think we can be a bit more interactive than we've been so far. So at the very end of the line, when they think we're done prototyping now, so let's actually push this to IT and get the application delivered. So there's two possibilities. First of all, we can create the whole documentation, as I mentioned. So let's actually do that. Let's give it a second, and then let's have a look at what we get here with our 25 minutes of prototyping. So we get a nicely structured document which describes what process did we define together, what form, what fields did we define, any details about, should those fields be readable, mandatory, visible, not visible, all the actions, so even the email notification that we defined is visible here. So we will have a complex document with all the information you have so far from your business user. So this is on the one side a good snapshot to generate this and to have an idea, okay, so what was it again that we defined when we sat down and we did our workshop. On the other hand, of course, what's way more practical, if you're using Webcon, this is just the very front-end prototyping tool. You can push this to the Designer Studio, which is our power user backend where IT will be in charge and they can take this input. So if I push it to the Designer Studio for IT, all the things we've defined over here while prototyping are going to be available for them. And actually the application as we see it right now is going to be working usually in a development environment, not immediately production. But any input given here is available to them, so nothing goes to waste. So they will take the description, the process, all the actions that were defined, the email, and they will add the final details. So the business logic, they will actually say to check the value, you need to look at this value and match it against 5,000, see if it's higher or not, and then go left or right in the process and set up the REST web services that are going to speak to SAP. So then the business user is not overwhelmed. Like I said at the beginning, if you give them the license to a tool like this, it's going to be too much for them. So IT does what they're good at. So the business is really going to be responsible for the what do I need, and then IT is going to be responsible for how to actually deliver. I see you're sitting on a question, please.
Yeah, I know that flow that you draw is made by the user. Usually it's made by the user. Speaking about an application, an app, not a flow.
Yeah, so So usually this would be, it could be just the end user. Usually it's an IT business analyst sitting in a room with the end user describing what are you doing currently in email and how does the process work. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If that flow is made by the user, then basically it's replacing the business analyst.
It's making his life a bit easier. Yeah. It depends. Usually it's good to have a business analyst on board because they will think in, again, a slightly different way. So they will, if you give it to a user, from my experience, the user thinks very much in a happy flow. So they will think about, if everything goes as it should be going, then the process looks like this. But all the exceptions, so what if this is not correct or what if that needs to be validated, there it's usually the business analyst that can sort of push the user. But yes, there are cases if you have somebody in the business department that does a good job, then they can do the prototyping on their own. This replacing the business analysts immediately to jump on that. So what is the good thing? The good thing about a low-code tool is that once you're done prototyping and you get this in the Designer Studio, so the power user backend, the business analyst is going to be qualified to actually build the application. So we don't need any highly skilled developers, the super technical people within your IT department. They can focus on the really complex stuff where you really need to write .NET, Java, whatever. And the business analyst might transform into actually the person that's going to be able to write the business logic for it and actually deliver the application. So for IT, they will have a lot more people within the department that are capable of delivering applications end-to-end to end users. So the business analyst is not losing his job, I would say. So
The position is more than just...
Exactly. No, but it is definitely true that the business can take over some of the part and some of the responsibility, and they will feel a bit of ownership. And this is also psychologically very important because the application they will get, it feels like it's theirs because they started with it, they described it. So this is what I wanted to show you today for building prototypes. So coming back to the presentation quickly. So, just to summarize what we've seen right now. So the business user is going to be engaged in the process from the very, very beginning. Results are going to be visible instantly. No waiting time until there is priority and something actually gets delivered. So no input goes to waste. Everything the business user describes is physical, tangible input and will save IT time, not like the paper requirements document that doesn't really give IT any good starting point. Quality is going to improve drastically since you don't describe something on a blank piece of paper, but you can actually give feedback, and it's much easier to criticize something you already see than to just describe something from completely scratch. That is just a fact. So IT is able to deliver much more, much faster, and IT is going to become an enabler to the business. And maybe as a funny anecdote, when we have a client that is working with the platform for half a year, we like to go to them, speak to them, and ask them, so how are you experiencing? What is the platform doing for you? What are the benefits you're getting? Give us some feedback. What is bad about it? What could we do better? And a lot of our customers actually, after working with the tool, so they start with a problem. They have a business case, they need to solve it, so that's how the process starts. After we speak to them, about half a year later, we very often hear that the biggest change that Webcon actually promoted within the company is that now finally business and IT are speaking to each other and they're getting applications delivered way faster and in a very agile, iterative way, supporting continuous improvement. So that's quite funny to see that they started with one specific process they wanted, but actually the biggest change is the organizational change of business and IT speaking to each other, thanks to this tool. From my side, that was it for this morning's session. Thank you so much for your attention. And as mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot. I will also be at the Webcon stand for today and tomorrow, so if you want to have some more detailed explanations, feel free to come over. The tool you've seen, the designer desk, is available for free. So even if you're not using Webcon, you just want to give it a test drive, you can go to webcon.com, designer desk, and you can actually download the prototyping tool and play with it for yourself or show it to some people. And like I said, we are available, so come to us with any questions. Any questions you have right now that I can try to answer? Don't be afraid. Yeah?
Do you also offer consulting for the IT? Because for the business analyst, it makes it easier to express what they need, but how does it make it easier for the IT? I mean, they will also need to translate.
So when it comes to starting to work with Webcon and consulting services from Webcon, there's a few models. Well, obviously here we're at the @.eu event, so it's very obviously @.eu is one of our partners delivering applications based on Webcon. So @.eu as a partner has a highly trained Webcon people that can help end customers actually deliver applications. There's actually a few, it could be the end customer that takes the platform and actually delivers the whole application. It could also be the end customer that does basically the prototyping with someone from @.eu, and actually @.eu will do the next step and deliver the application. And besides that, Webcon also has consulting services, and we can be the backup for @.eu in those cases if they don't, if they have any questions. Thank you. Any more questions from you for now? No, so.
I have one more.
Oh, we have one more question. Perfect.
You mentioned the ERP.
Yeah.
Between this workflow, and does it have to be an ERP? Can it be directly to the vendor? The item list to be sent, the purchase order?
It doesn't have to be any specific system. ERP is the usual suspect, but when it comes to integration, we are actually open to integrate over database connections, over web services with any tool. And commonly, Webcon is, I usually say it's sort of a process layer on top of enterprise systems that are already within the organization. So if you already have a source of truth, you can connect to those systems, get information on board and not reinvent the wheel. I mean, use what you already have. But then the process is going to be adaptable, flexible, changeable, and it's going to be one unified user interface for your end user.
Is it a hosted or on-prem solution?
How you run it technically is up to you. So the solution can run on-premise. If you have a cloud environment, AWS or Azure, that you're using for other solutions, you can run Webcon over there. If you would like Webcon to provide it from a cloud solution in a SaaS model, we can provide it from an Azure, in that case, that we will arrange. And then it's just going to be in a subscription model, basically. So it's really up to you. It's one solution, so we don't have a different solution for on-prem and a different one for cloud, as some other low-code platforms do. So also the migration, I mean, if the company's strategy is cloud right now, and in 5 years' time they change their mind and they want to have it back on the server in the basement in your company, that's no problem. It's all in a SQL database underwater, so it's a matter of picking up the database, moving the installation to on-prem, and you're back up and running. Anything more? And if not, then thank you so much for your attention. I hope it was an informative session, and as I said, the tool is available for free. If it sounds interesting, either give it a try for yourself, or if you would like to have a demo from us, come to the Webcon booth and we can set something up. Perfect, thank you.